90% of people would not survive in such conditions. You are a cowboy in the middle of the endless prairie, your matches are wet from the pouring rain, and the nearest town is 3 days away. A cold night is coming, and without a fire, you are doomed. But the pioneers of the Wild West knew dozens of ways to get fire from seemingly nothing. These people turned fire making into a high art of survival. They used flint and steel when others had only wet matches. They knew the secrets of the fire plow and knew how to strike a spark from the most unexpected objects. Watch the video to the end, and you'll learn how an ordinary bottle of whiskey could become a life-saving lighter, and why every cowboy carried a piece of tinder fungus in his pocket. What if I told you that the most reliable way to get fire didn't require matches or flint? Settlers in the Wild West adopted the fire plow technique from Native Americans, a method that worked even in the most hopeless conditions. It was a method in which 2 sticks were turned into a source of vital flame. The basis of the fire plow is a board of soft wood with a groove cut into it. Cedar, willow, or poplar were considered ideal woods. The wood had to be completely dry, so experienced travelers always kept their supplies under their saddles or in other protected places. The second element was a wooden stick made of a harder wood, such as oak or ash. This stick was moved vigorously along the groove, creating friction. The secret was in the correct angle of inclination and constant pressure. With intense friction, wood dust began to accumulate at the end of the groove. This dust gradually heated up and darkened, turning into a smoldering ember. The whole process required patience and the right technique. It took several minutes of continuous work from the first movement to the appearance of coal. As soon as a smoldering ember appeared, it was carefully transferred to a prepared tinder. Dry grass, birch bark, or specially treated tinder fungus were used as tinder. Light puffs of air turned the smoldering ember into an open flame. The skill of mastering the fire plow was passed down from generation to generation. An experienced traveler could get a fire going in 2 or 3 minutes, even in windy weather. To do this, he chose a sheltered place and prepared all the materials in advance. The technique required physical endurance. The movements had to be quick and rhythmic, without stopping. Many beginners made the mistake of stopping to rest, which caused the wood dust to cool down and required them to start over. The fire plow was especially popular among hunters and trappers who spent months in the wilderness. They knew that this method would never fail if there was dry wood and skilled hands. It was knowledge that could save lives in a critical situation. This ancient method proved that a person could obtain fire with only natural materials and knowledge. It did not depend on industrial goods and worked in all climatic conditions. The ability to use a fire plow made a person truly independent in the wilderness. It is interesting to see how this technique is perceived in different parts of the world. Where are you from? Do you agree that such skills were critical for survival in the Wild West? Want to know the main secret of every experienced cowboy? Flint and steel were the main companions of any traveler in the Wild West. This duo, proven over centuries, guaranteed fire in almost any conditions. Every self-respecting pioneer carried flint in a special leather pouch and steel on his belt. Flint is a hard mineral that can produce sparks when struck against steel. The best specimens were brought from the east, but experienced travelers knew how to find suitable stones in the local mountains. Flint had to have sharp edges and a dense structure without cracks. The striker was a curved strip of hardened steel. Its shape had been perfected over generations. The C-shaped bend ensured the correct angle of impact and protected the fingers from sparks. Many cowboys made strikers from old horseshoes or saw blades. The technique of striking sparks required skill and precision. The flint was held in one hand and the striker in the other. With a sharp sliding motion, the striker was run along the sharp edge of the flint at an angle of about 45 degrees. With the right strike, bright sparks flew. The secret to success lay in the preparation of the tinder. The best tinder was considered to be a specially treated fungus called Fomes fomentarius. This fungus was boiled in a solution of saltpeter, then dried and ground into fine fibers. The resulting material ignited at the slightest spark. When special tinder was not available, charred fabric was used. Pieces of linen or cotton cloth were placed in an iron can with a small hole and heated over a fire. The result was a material that easily ignited from a spark. Dry grass, birch bark, juniper fibers, or fluffed rope threads were also used as tinder. The main thing was that the material was completely dry and had a large surface area in contact with the air for quick ignition. The process of starting a fire began with preparing kindling. Thin, dry twigs about the thickness of a pencil. They were placed in a small pile next to the place where sparks were struck. As soon as the tinder caught fire, it was placed under the kindling and the flame was fanned. Experienced pioneers could get a fire going in a minute, even in difficult conditions. They knew that success depended on the quality of preparation: good flint, a sharp striker, and properly prepared tinder. It was a system that had been honed to perfection. Flint and steel never failed. They were not affected by moisture like matches and did not run out like kerosene in a lamp. This simple set was a symbol of independence and readiness for any challenges of the wild. But what if you didn't even have a flint on hand? In the next chapter, you'll learn about an amazing way to make fire using the power of the sun and an ordinary glass bottle. What you are about to learn will surely surprise you. In the saloons of the Wild West, broken bottle shards littered the floor after every fight, but experienced travelers knew that an intact glass bottle could be a life-saving tool for making fire. This method worked in clear weather and did not require any additional materials. The principle of the solar lighter is based on the ability of glass to focus the sun's rays into a single point. A round bottle filled with clean water became a powerful lens. The water enhanced the effect, making the focus more accurate and intense. To create such a lighter, the bottle was completely filled with clean water without air bubbles. It was important that the glass was transparent, without cracks or scratches. Even small defects could scatter the sun's rays and reduce the effectiveness of the device. The bottle was held between the sun and the tinder at a distance of 10-15 centimeters from the flammable material. By slowly moving the bottle, they found the point where the sun's rays converged into the brightest spot. At this point, the temperature could reach several hundred degrees. Charred material, pieces of burnt fabric or wood shavings, worked best as tinder. Dark materials absorb solar heat faster than light ones. Dry grass or birch bark also ignited well from the focus beam. The process required patience and a steady hand. The focal spot had to be held in one place for several seconds or even minutes. Gradually, the tinder began to smoke, then smolder, and finally burst into a bright flame. This method was especially appreciated by scouts and hunters who did not want to give themselves away with smoke from a fire plow or the sound of flint striking a tinderbox. The solar lighter worked completely silently and did not produce smoke until the tinder ignited. Cowboys quickly learned to use not only bottles, but also other glass objects. The bottom of a broken bottle, a lens from glasses, or even a piece of ice on a frosty sunny day. Anything could become a tool for making fire. The main limitation of the method was its dependence on weather conditions. On a cloudy day or at dusk, the solar lighter was useless. Therefore, wise travelers always had several ways of obtaining fire and did not rely on just one method. Some craftsmen learned to make permanent solar lighters by polishing pieces of clear quartz or other minerals. These lenses were stronger than glass and lasted for years. They became true family heirlooms, passed down from father to son. Ready to learn the most important secret of all fire masters? Without good tinder, even the brightest sparks are useless. The pioneers of the Wild West knew dozens of types of natural tinder, but the king among them was the tinder fungus. This amazing organism grew on dead birch trees and turned into the perfect material for starting a fire. Tinder fungus looks like a hard growth on a tree trunk, usually gray-brown in color. Inside, it has a spongy structure with many small pores. It is this porous interior that became valuable tinder after special processing. They collected tinder fungus in dry weather, selecting only healthy specimens without signs of rot. The hard outer crust was cut off with a knife, exposing the soft inner part, which was reddish or brown in color. This part was cut into thin slices and carefully dried. To improve the properties of the tinder, it was boiled in a solution of wood ash or saltpeter. The ash contained potash, which made the material more susceptible to sparks. After boiling, the slices were dried again and stored in a dry place, wrapped in leather or cloth. Properly prepared tinder fungus ignited instantly from the slightest spark. It smoldered long and evenly, giving enough time to fan the flames. This material was so effective that a single coin-sized piece was enough to start a fire. Experienced trappers and hunters always carried a supply of tinder fungus with them in special tinder boxes. Small metal boxes. These boxes protected the tinder from moisture and mechanical damage. Losing tinder in the wilderness could mean death from cold. In the next chapter, you will learn how to turn ordinary items from your luggage into effective tools for making fire. Every traveler in the Wild West had a knife in their arsenal, a universal tool for hundreds of different tasks. But few people knew that the same knife, in skilled hands, could be an excellent means of obtaining fire. The iron and wood method did not require any special tools and worked with almost any iron object. The principle of this method is based on the same friction as the fire plow, but using metal. The blade of a knife or any other iron object was vigorously rubbed against a dry wooden surface, creating fine shavings and heating them to the ignition temperature. Soft woods such as pine, spruce, or poplar were best suited for this purpose. The wood had to be completely dry, the iron object was held at an acute angle and scraped quickly across the wood, creating fine shavings. The secret lay in the correct technique. The knife was held almost perpendicular to the surface of the wood, and quick, short movements were made. It was important to maintain constant pressure and not stop until the shavings began to smoke. As soon as the first signs of smoldering appeared, a thin haze and a characteristic smell, the iron was removed and the smoking shavings were carefully transferred to the prepared tinder. Light puffs of air turned the smoldering shavings into an open flame. This method was especially appreciated by cowboys who spent a lot of time in the saddle. They always had a knife with them, and suitable wood could be found almost anywhere. There was no need to carry additional equipment or look for special stones. In addition to a knife, they used any iron objects with a sharp edge. Horseshoes, tools, even sharp stones with a high iron content. The main thing was that the material was hard enough to create intense friction. This method was especially useful in winter, when other methods might not work due to humidity or frost. Iron and wood were always at hand, and moisture had less effect on their effectiveness than on flint or tinder. Did you know that the pioneers' weapons could save their lives in a completely unexpected way? Flintlock rifles and pistols, which were the main weapons of the Wild West era, had a built-in mechanism for striking sparks. In a critical situation, these weapons could become a life-saving means of starting a fire. The flintlock consisted of a trigger with a clamped flint and a steel striker. When the trigger was pulled, the trigger struck the striker with force, striking a stream of bright sparks. Under normal conditions, these sparks ignited the gunpowder on the shelf, but they could also be used to ignite tinder. The procedure for turning a weapon into a flintlock was simple. First, you had to make sure that the weapon was unloaded and safe. Then a small amount of dry tinder was placed on the shelf where the gunpowder was usually stored. The flint in the trigger had to be sharp and well secured.
We need to get this fire going quickly.
When the trigger was pulled, the sparks fell directly onto the tinder on the shelf. If the tinder was of good quality and completely dry, it ignited instantly. The main thing was to act quickly and carefully transfer the burning tinder to the prepared kindling. This method had an important advantage. It worked even in strong winds. The rifle's shelf protected the tinder from the wind, and the mechanism itself produced powerful sparks. Many cowboys and hunters relied on this method in emergency situations. But what if the weather was so bad that even the most reliable methods didn't work? Ready to learn the secret of all-weather tinder? Pine resin was gold for anyone who knew the secrets of starting a fire in the Wild West. This sticky, fragrant substance burned even in wet weather and produced such a bright flame that it could replace a candle or torch. Experienced travelers always knew where to find resin and how to use it properly. Resin was collected from coniferous trees, pine, spruce, fir. The best source was hardened drippings on the bark, which formed in places where the tree had been naturally damaged. This resin was concentrated and contained the maximum amount of combustible substances. Fresh, liquid resin was also useful, but it had to be prepared correctly. It was collected in small containers, leather bags or birch bark boxes. Over time, the resin thickened and became easier to transport and use. To start a fire, the resin was applied to thin, dry twigs or splinters. This made excellent kindling, which ignited at the slightest spark and burned long and brightly. Resinous kindling was so effective that it could even ignite slightly damp wood. Resinous branches, parts of trees with a high resin content, were especially prized. They could be found in places where trees were damaged or where branches broke off naturally. Such branches burned like candles, providing a steady flame for hours. Native Americans taught settlers how to make torches from resin and bark for nighttime travel. Birch bark was soaked in resin and rolled into a tube. Such a torch burned evenly and was not extinguished by the wind, lighting the way in the darkness of the prairies. Resinous shavings were used as reliable tinder. Thin shavings containing resin ignited instantly and produced a steady flame. They were stored for future use in waterproof containers made of birch bark or leather. In winter, resinous materials became especially valuable. When ordinary tinder became damp from snow and fog, resinous shavings remained effective. The resin repelled moisture and retained its combustible properties even in the most unfavorable conditions. Some travelers learned how to make artificial resinous kindling. They boiled pieces of bark in resin, creating a concentrated combustible material. Such kindling was compact, could be stored for a long time, and was guaranteed to ignite in any weather. The smell of burning resin became an integral part of the romance of the Wild West. This aroma signified warmth, safety, and human presence in the vast wilderness. A resinous fire was not just a source of heat, but a symbol of civilization amid the chaos of undeveloped lands. Blacksmiths and craftsmen who set out for the Wild West brought with them not only tools, but also valuable knowledge about the properties of metals. They knew a secret that could save lives. Iron filings combined with flint produced particularly bright and hot sparks that could ignite even the poorest quality tinder. Iron filings were obtained when sharpening tools, shoeing horses, or repairing equipment. Small particles of iron removed with a file or emery were collected and stored in small containers. These filings were a real treasure for making fire. When flint strikes steel, some metal particles break off, and heating up from friction produce sparks. If there are already fine iron filings on the surface of the steel, the number of sparks increases many times over. The result is a veritable fireworks display of burning metal particles. The filings were applied to the surface of the flint or steel striker. A thin layer was sufficient. The main thing was that the particles evenly covered the striking surface. Upon contact with flint, the filings ignited and created a powerful stream of sparks. This method was especially effective in wet weather, when the usual sparks from flint and steel were not hot enough. Burning iron filings had a higher temperature and could ignite even slightly damp tinder. This was a real lifesaver in critical situations. Experienced craftsmen learned to use filings from different metals. Steel filings produced bright white sparks, while iron filings produced orange-red sparks. Each metal had its own burning characteristics, and knowledge of these nuances helped to choose the most suitable material for specific conditions. The filings were stored in hermetically sealed containers to protect them from moisture. Even a small amount of water could ruin the entire supply, turning it into rusty dust. Therefore, leather bags with wax or small metal boxes with tight lids were used. The winter months in the Wild West were particularly harsh, but they also brought unexpected opportunities. Experienced travelers knew how to turn ice into a powerful lens to focus the sun's rays. This method only worked in frosty, clear weather, but it did not require any additional materials. To create an ice lens, you needed clear ice without cracks or air bubbles. Ice from standing water bodies, which froze slowly and evenly, was best suited for this purpose. River ice often contained impurities and was less transparent. The lens was cut with a sharp knife, giving it a convex shape on both sides. The central part had to be thicker than the edges, like a regular glass lens. The surface was carefully polished, using the warmth of the hands to melt and smooth out any unevenness. The polishing process required patience and precision. The ice could not be heated too much, lest it begin to melt. At the same time, the surface had to be perfectly smooth in order to effectively focus the sun's rays. The finished lens was held between the sun and the tinder, slowly moving it until the brightest focal spot was obtained. In the cold, the ice lens worked even better than glass, providing very sharp focus and high temperature at the point of concentration of the rays. The main problem was time. The ice lens began to melt from the heat of the sun after just a few minutes of operation. Therefore, all preparations, tinder, kindling, firewood, had to be made in advance in order to take advantage of the short operating time of the lens. Some craftsmen learned to make spare lenses, storing them in the shade or burying them in the snow. This allowed them to have a reserve in case the first lens melted prematurely. On particularly cold days, one lens could work for up to half an hour. The ice lens method was especially popular among hunters and trappers who spent the winter in the mountains. They valued it for its absolute silence, no sounds of impact or friction that could scare away game or attract unwanted attention. The first aid kits of Wild West travelers contained not only medicines, but also unexpected aids in obtaining fire. Potassium permanganate, known as potassium permanganate, combined with glycerin created a chemical reaction capable of producing fire without any friction or sparks. It was a true miracle of 19th century chemistry. Potassium permanganate was carried as an antiseptic for treating wounds and disinfecting water. Glycerin was used for medical purposes and as a component of various ointments. Few people knew that these two harmless substances together could become a powerful source of fire. The reaction occurred when potassium permanganate crystals were mixed with a few drops of glycerin. After a few seconds or minutes, the mixture spontaneously ignited, producing a bright flame and intense heat. The reaction time depended on the purity of the substances and the ambient temperature. The procedure required caution and precise proportions. Too much glycerin could lead to an overly violent reaction, and too little could prevent it from happening at all. Experienced travelers knew the correct ratio and always had precise dosages of both substances on hand. This method was especially valuable in extreme conditions when all other means of obtaining fire failed. Rain, snow, strong winds, nothing could interfere with the chemical reaction. Fire was guaranteed regardless of weather conditions. The main drawback was the limited supply. Potassium permanganate and glycerin were expensive and not always available. They were saved for the most critical situations, used only when all other methods had been exhausted. It was the last resort of an experienced traveler. The reaction produced not only fire, but also thick smoke, which could serve as a distress signal. In some situations, this was an additional advantage. It was possible to start a fire and send a signal for help at the same time. The purple smoke from potassium permanganate was visible from a great distance. The secrets of fire making in the Wild West are not just a set of technical techniques. It is a philosophy of survival based on a deep understanding of nature and the ability to use its resources. Every method, from the ancient fire plow to chemical reactions, required knowledge, skill, and presence of mind. And pioneers and cowboys knew that fire was not just heat and light. It was the boundary between civilization and savagery, between life and death. The ability to make fire in any conditions made a person truly independent and ready for any trials of the harsh prairie. This knowledge was passed down from generation to generation, becoming intertwined with legends and stories. Every experienced traveler had their own secret methods and proven techniques. Fire brought people together around campfires, where friendships, plans, and hopes for the future were born. Which of these ancient methods of obtaining fire did you find most interesting? Do you think such skills could be useful to modern people? Share your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to subscribe to our channel to learn more amazing stories about how our ancestors survived in the harshest conditions.